Welcome to the Iron Self podcast, where we jump into health, fitness, mindset, and becoming the best version of yourself. Today with your hosts, Mike and Kayla Minion. Welcome back to the Iron Self podcast.
Morning, guys.
So on today's episode, we are talking self-love.
Ooh, giving yourself some of that love.
So I think self-love is one of those things that gets a little convoluted.
I think one of the most common things that people, when they hear the word self-love, they immediately just start thinking of self-care, which is a form of self-love, but it is not by any means the be-all, end-all.
I don't think that there's also a point that you ever fully hit self-love. Like, I think it's like one of those things when you're like aiming for enlightenment. And self-love is kind of like that. Like, you're aiming for this, like, amazing piece of what is going to be 100% unconditional love. And I think that we're always striving for it. I just don't think that there's a point where we stop and we go, yep, I've hit it.
I agree in the sense that, you know, any relationship, whether it be with a spouse, with your children, with work people, with every relationship that you have is something that you actively need to work on. It's not like you can just be like, oh, that relationship is fine, done there, right? It's the same for yourself as it is for anybody else. If you want to have that deep connection with yourself or with other people, you need to actively work on that.
Well, and you also have good and bad days. Like, we don't just, like, wake up every day as like, wow, I love this person in the mirror. This person is amazing. That's it. We're done. We've hit this. This is going to be fantastic. It's
good and bad moments, not days.
Yes, okay. That's a good way to say it. Yes, I know. So let's jump into what is self-love, because it gets mixed up with the self-esteem. And self-love and self-esteem are a little bit different. Or a lot of bit different.
Well, there's so many aspects to self-love. So, I mean, self-love could be, it shows up so many different ways. Being able to forgive yourself if you mess up, that is showing yourself compassion. That is showing yourself some love, right? Likewise, being able to admit faults, admit when you are wrong, and being able to, again, move forward from that without just dwelling on that is an aspect of self-love, but there's so many aspects to it.
Well, recognizing when maybe we're not being super kind to ourselves, because this person that you are is totally worth the love, but sometimes we use other people's, I'm going to say, opinions or other people's standpoints to determine whether or not we are worthy of our love, and we use that as a tool to go, yes, today I'm worthy, tomorrow maybe I'm not as worthy. And I think that that's where we need to get rid of that worthiness and just decide, yes, I'm going to love myself. Like Mike said, it comes back to a relationship and working on that relationship. And so when you work on a relationship in a marriage or on a friendship or with your children, you are constantly working on that, and you love that person unconditionally. It doesn't matter, you know, if a person does something that maybe wasn't in alignment with your thoughts or views. Just like if you act or behave in a certain way that is not, I'm going to say, your normal or in alignment with what you actually believe, allowing yourself to let that go and move forward.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, just from what you were saying there, that stands out to me is the ability to show up without judgment. Now, this is you know, with your children, with your spouse, you actively try not to judge them if you see them doing something that might not be the way that you expect them to react to something. So then, in those circumstances, you do have like a course correction where it's like, okay, well, this might, you know, serve you better, or whatever that looks like. But when you do it to yourself, typically we tend to judge ourselves pretty hard, especially when we know what we're capable of. Like for yourself or for me, if we miss a day or two in the gym, we're like, oh, whoa, the world is falling off the anchors because we missed a day in the gym, because we hold ourselves to that standard. So again, that the ability to accept without judgment, I think, comes in huge with self-love.
Judgment is one of those things, like,
terrifying.
We live in this state of, if I judge myself enough, I will one day love that person.
I'll become perfect.
But let's just think, if you judge your spouse, like, if I was to sit here and judge Mike for every little thing that he does,
She'd go crazy in about 5 minutes.
maybe that's what happens the week before. No, I'm just kidding. But if I was to sit here and do that, we wouldn't have a good relationship. We would be fighting all the time. We wouldn't be seeing eye to eye. And then because of me judging him, I'm actively picking out all of the negative things or searching for them. So we have this piece in our brain called our reticular activating system. When you tell your reticular activating system to bring some awareness or focus to something, you're going to find a lot more of it. So if I start judging Mike and picking every little piece apart, my reticular activating system is like, oh yeah, you know when he doesn't clean out the sink trap after doing the dishes? So awful. Like terrible person, really. And then I'm like, okay, and you know when he wears the same pants for a couple days on end and doesn't wash them? Just brutal, right? So now I'm like starting to look for these little things, and my reticular activating system in my brain is starting to pick it out. It's the same thing when it comes to yourself. When you look in the mirror or you judge yourself based on one thing, and your reticular activating system is like, wow, if those pants don't fit, she's gonna die. Like, that's legit it, because your reticular activating system is brought to focus and your brain is meant to keep you in that survival state in order to live. So we're looking for the negative things in order to make sure that we keep thriving and surviving. So it's like, okay, well, that hair was out of place. That, you can't love that person if the hair is out of place. I mean, like, really? This is the point I'm trying to make.
So I agree 100%. So this is where we need to be able to step away from that judgment, especially against ourselves, to accept our flaws, right? Nobody is perfect. Nobody in this entire world is perfect. So expecting yourself, or me expecting myself to be perfect every day, holding myself to that, if it isn't perfect, it isn't good enough standard, isn't serving me. Just like it's not serving anybody that's listening to this that puts themselves through that same thing. You need to be able to, as Kayla likes to say, lower your standards a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean have no standards. That doesn't mean like, well, I'm just going to coast for the rest of my life. But it means that you can't hold yourself to a perfect standard. I don't know if everybody listening is anything like me, where it's like OCD kicks in and everything has to be 100%. I spent 4 hours vacuuming one rug in our house this weekend because dog hair drives me nuts. So again, the OCD kicked in. So realizing that is a part of me and accepting that, because I have to accept that so that I can love myself. But it's the same thing. If it was anybody else, they might be like, oh, I can't do this. This isn't acceptable. I'm spending too much time on this, and they start to beat themselves up on that. Whereas myself, I know that I'm a little OCD, so I had no problem spending that time.
And you know what? It's okay to have somebody that's also going to call you on your shit and hold you accountable. And you can be that person for yourself. When you're noticing that negative critic come in and chime in, beginning to question, beginning to really ask yourself, is this valid and true? Does this actually hold merit? Does it have weight? Because if you're, say, judging yourself based on a behavior that you've done, is this something that I always do? Is this actually valid? Does this actually affect me to the extent that I'm allowing it to affect me? Because when it's in our brain, it feels really, really big. And sometimes when we put it on paper or we talk it out loud, it's like, oh, that doesn't sound as...
Wasn't a big deal at all.
Yeah. And so when we look at self-esteem, we often will take our self-confidence and our self-esteem and link them into our self-love. Self-esteem is the way that you feel about yourself. It's the way that you perceive yourself to be.
Love is a feeling. You can love yourself. That can be part of it, but it's separate.
They're separate. And self-confidence, confidence comes with the ability to know how you can follow through on something, how you can do something. So confidence comes with repetition.
I would say confidence is performance-based. It's something that you have to perform over and over and over and over, so then you build that confidence in whatever skill we're talking about.
Right. And so if we're talking about self-confidence in the sense of, like, you feel good about yourself and you're walking around with your head held high and you're walking tall, that self-confidence comes with pretending and practicing with that self-confidence. So if you practice walking taller, if you practice walking into a room and feeling like you are invincible, that's where that practice is going to come in, and that's where you're going to build self-confidence in that world, right? Just like when you started a new job, you were probably not overly confident with it, but through time and through learning, all of a sudden you're way more confident in your job, and it's like you know what you're doing. That's confidence. Self-esteem comes from feeling better about yourself, understanding your own attributes and behaviors, and recognizing that you are worthy, that you are enough, and that everything is good right now, and that you can continue forward in that manner. Self-love says, I am worthy of love. Right? When we think of love, a lot of people think of like the Disney movies, right? Like it's just going to be like this amazing thing, and the stars are going to open up, and
Picture Princess Jasmine and Aladdin on the magic carpet for the first time. That's love.
That's love, right? That's love. But that's what we all assume that love is going to be. And so all of a sudden, when I have to start practicing self-love and it doesn't look like I'm on a magic carpet, then all of a sudden I'm questioning, like, do I really have that self-love?
So self-love shows up different for everybody. So just so everybody knows, it's not on a magic carpet for everybody. It is not any one particular way for every single person. It shows up differently in everybody's life. Self-love for some people looks like practicing gratitude. It looks like releasing judgments or past versions of themselves that aren't serving them anymore. For some people, they have already done that, right? So now self-love for them is more of like a maintenance program, and it's just, being more mindful, being more present in their moments day to day. Things like that. Just the small stuff once you've kind of started that wheel rolling.
Self-love can be setting boundaries for yourself, right? Really,
self-love is setting boundaries.
Well, that's what I mean. Like being very aware of what you need to set boundaries, whether that be boundaries for yourself in regards to how you're going to behave, or boundaries with people in your life of where you're going to allow them in, maybe not allow them in, whatever that might be. I know I was recently talking to a client about this, and it was something that we had worked through in our house, is setting boundaries with our children around spaces, what the expectation was with spaces, right? So lots of people get really neurotic with cleanliness in their house, and so I hear the excuse a lot of the time, well, I didn't get my workout done because I was too busy cleaning up after my kids, or this and that and that. What we said was, if you begin to set boundaries in your house going, here's the expectations for the kids' toy room, here's the expectations for your bedrooms, and this is the expectations for my space. So now I'm not worried about the house as its entire whole. I'm worried about these spaces that I'm responsible for, and just reminding the kids, hey, on your days, these are the spaces you're responsible for, and this is what the expectation is around that. That for me was really helpful in my self-love journey, because I wasn't putting the expectation on myself that the house needed to look a certain way. So that's just an example of like a really minor boundary, but it's a boundary of space that I needed for myself so that I didn't feel anxious in my own house.
Yeah, and setting boundaries is a beautiful thing. I never used to set boundaries. I would say yes to everything. I was the eternal yes man. If somebody needed help with something, I was always the one who said yes. And it's the person that I am. I like helping people. That's okay. But being able to realize when you are taxed and kind of at the end of your rope, when you don't have the energy to give, and realizing that it's okay to say no, and that these people, as long as they're the friends that you think they are, that they should be, they're not going to judge you for saying no, whether it's going out to a social event or helping somebody move, helping somebody with their car, whatever that might be. But being able to say no and be okay with that was a big learning point for myself.
Well, and self-love is very much about being maybe a little bit more selfish as well. If we think about it, our self-love needs to be unconditional. So it doesn't matter what behavior I do, I'm going to love this person at the end of the day. It's kind of like when you fight with a spouse, at the end of the day, you still pick them.
You still got to get in bed with them at the end of the night. Grumpy.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is that you still pick them. I still choose to be with you, just like I choose to love this person no matter what. Yes, I have done a lot of things in my life that maybe I regret doing, behaviors that maybe I'm not as proud of, moments that I'm not as proud of. But accepting those, that self-acceptance says that I accept myself unconditionally how I am without judgment. This is the way it happened. I can't change the past. I can only change the future. And I bring in some self-compassion with my self-acceptance that says, I am human. I make mistakes. Mistakes are okay to make. And that I grieve, I suffer just like everybody else grieves and suffers. Our degree is different, but we are all in this. It is a human experience. Like, we can go into our mind, we can meditate, we can be in this mind space with, I'm going to call it like our soul or our higher being. But at the end of the day, I am human.
Yeah.
And humans make mistakes, and acknowledging that, accepting that, being able to step forward and say, I still choose to show up for myself. If you're ready to make a change in your life, step into the best version of you, check out our Iron Self Transformation Program. Find more info on our website, www.ironbodycoach.com.
I agree with absolutely everything you just said. The one thing that really stood out to me there is being able to, we all have issues from our past. We all have things. Everybody who is alive right now has been through some shit, right? It doesn't matter. Everybody that thinks they have this perfect life, at some point in your life you struggled. At some point in your life you needed to have your own back, and that's okay. But figuring out that, we might not have lived a perfect life, but everything that we went through made us the person we are today, and practicing gratitude and thankfulness for that, so important, right? Like, I've been through some shit in my life. For anybody who listened to my podcast about, Meet Coach Mike, you guys heard some stuff there. I've been through a lot, but I can't say that I would be the same person I am today if I hadn't gone through those trials and tribulations, if I hadn't figured out, kind of carved my own path along the way. And learning to love myself through all of that, learning how to forgive myself, how to still, hold my head high and realize that the person I am now can't be the person I am if I didn't go through the stuff I did. So again, practicing gratitude. I'm very thankful for all the shit I've been through in my life, because I'd be completely different if I hadn't gone through that.
I think that a lot of the time too, we acknowledge our self-love in consistency with where I am at now. So somebody might look at you or I and go, oh, well, they're doing all of, they're eating healthy, they're moving their body, they're doing all these things that they're preaching. So they must have a lot of self-love because of that. But where I look at self-love is, I acknowledge all of my trials and tribulations, and my self-love is built on that. Like, you grow in relationships when you go through things with people, when you have experiences, whether that be good or bad. That's how you build bigger bonds. That's how you build better relationships. So I can look at moments of my past and say, this moment when I was a child, wow, that was a really tough moment for that child. But the strength that it took that child to persevere forward,
Great.
I am so grateful for that strength that that little girl had. That she had the mindset that she could do this, and she could get out of bed the next morning and everything was going to be okay, and she could move forward from that. Wow. And then I look at this moment of, you know what? I was severely depressed. I was on antidepressants, and then I decided to mix that with alcohol, and I had these crazy outbursts. And I look at those and I go, wow, I really wish I hadn't have acted in that way. But without that moment, without that outburst, I wouldn't know what it felt like to be at my all-time low. I wouldn't have known what it felt like to not be able to get out of bed in the morning and to cry and not eat for weeks on end. I wouldn't know what that severe level of depression had felt like. And wow, the fact that I could grow and come out of that just deserves admiration. So the fact that I can now look at that person and go, wow, you were really, really hurting, and I care for you so much, and I appreciate that you learned what it felt like to struggle, and now you can see what it feels like to feel better about yourself. Wow, now I'm going through all of these cycles, looking back on my life and realizing the things that I regretted are not necessarily a regret, but they are a period of growth. They are a period of building that relationship with myself. And now I can look at this person and go, wow, you've been through a lot. You've really struggled. You've had high highs and you've had low lows. And that's built you into this person that you are today. And I look at my kids and I look at how much they love me, and I can see, wow, they with the innocent eyes that they have, they love me unconditionally. I should be able to love myself unconditionally, because it wouldn't matter if I told my kids my entire past. They would look at me and go, Mommy, I still love you. And so to be able to look at myself in the mirror and go, all of those things in the past, that has made you into the person that you are today, and I still love you no matter what. I still pick you. I still choose to show up for you, and you are still worthy of every action to keep moving forward.
Yeah, perfect. I think, so for anybody that's listening that struggles with self-love, some of the first things you need to do, in my books anyways, and this is just, modest old me, learning to forgive yourself and thanking yourself for all the stuff you've been through. Two of the biggest pivot points you're going to hit when you're like, I'm in a low point, I need to learn how to love myself. Well, first you need to forgive yourself. You need to be okay with everything that you've gone through and everything that you've done, really practicing that forgiveness and being okay with it. And then starting to pivot into gratitude and thankfulness for the person that brought you through those hard times. And starting to really appreciate how hard you've had to work to get to where you are today. Now, I'm not saying that it's all sunshine and lollipops because you've worked so hard. Sure, it might be a hard life that you've been through. You might have gone through some serious shit. But again, being thankful for that and saying, if I hadn't been as resilient as I am, I might not have made it through that as unscathed as I am.
Well, in our episode with Sean Meyer, I don't remember what episode it was, but we talked all about post-traumatic growth, and whether it was trauma or stress, and doesn't even have to be trauma or stress, just the trials and tribulations of life, but seeing every sticking point as an opportunity for growth and development is huge, and honoring that space for yourself. One of the things that you had just said was learning to love yourself, and I want to say that it's not a learning journey. It's a choice, because you choose who you love and how you show up for that person. So rather than learning to love yourself, I'm going to invite you to choose to love yourself. And when you choose to love yourself today, just see how that changes your behavior and your thought patterns around it. Because I feel like sometimes when we use the language of I'm learning to do it, it lends way to the fact that there is a chance that I might not learn this. Whereas when it's a choice, I'm either choosing to do it or I'm not choosing to do it. There is no middle ground in between that, right? We can make excuses for why we didn't make those choices or why we didn't follow through on certain choices, but those are excuses at the end of the day, and your choice will resemble what comes of that. So when we choose to show up for ourselves and we choose to love ourselves, then we start acting in that way. Right? When you choose to get married, you choose to dive into a relationship, and you choose to work hard for that relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that that relationship always works out for everybody, but it's still a choice in how you show up in that relationship. And so with yourself, you only have you at the end of the day. If everything was stripped away, you only have you for the rest of your life. You are stuck in this body and in this head, so you might as well show up for this person in a loving manner, in a caring manner, right? When I show myself love, maybe that is me going to the gym every morning because my body doesn't hurt when I do that. When I show myself love, maybe that is having a piece of hazelnut chocolate bar at the end of the day. Why? Because it makes me feel whole.
Why? Because of Nutella.
I love Nutella. But I'm just saying, like, showing yourself love might show up in different ways.
Without judgment.
Without judgment. And so also resonating the behaviors that you want to have for that self. So if you're sitting there complaining that you don't love yourself and you're choosing to eat processed garbage and, oh, well, I just do this because it's convenient, it's easy, whatever, it's only lending way to you disliking that person more because it makes you feel like shit. It makes your digestive system not work as well, and it makes your energy becomes drained, is what I'm trying to say. So all I'm saying is if you just start from a place for it just to show yourself love of nourishing yourself with a little bit more whole foods. I'm not saying go out and load your plate full of vegetables. Just start choosing whole foods first. your body will start to feel better. When your body starts to feel better with our gut-brain axis, when our guts are feeling better, our brain is working better. When our brain is working better, our guts are feeling better. So now I start to make healthier choices over time. Maybe that's healthier relationships. Maybe that's healthier boundaries. It's just like this cascade of effect, because when you feel better, you choose better. I think that that's really the crux of self-love, is feeling better and choosing more targeted approach to that self-love, to that positive mind state.
Yeah, for sure. And again, one more thing I don't think we really touched on too much today, but building that honesty within yourself too. If you say you're going to do something, actually doing it and following through, so that you start to learn that self-trust again. So being able to trust your decisions, trust your choices, so then when you do make big important decisions, you know that you're making the right choice in your mind anyways.
I think that's huge. Right? And that, you're right, that is something we didn't touch on, was the trusting relationship that we need to have within ourselves. I think that we look for that trusting relationship with others, but often we don't follow through on our own trusting relationship. And when we say, I'm going to do this, and we don't do that, that creates that distrust. So now when we look at like if you look at something called like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we can even look at it with the chakra system, but your basic root chakra, or the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, is your basic survival needs. Your, having a roof over your head, so shelter, food, water, all of those basic needs. When we are not meeting our basic survival state, meaning we don't feel safe in our own being, that's often due to trust. And it can also be due to trauma, but part of trauma recovery is creating a safe space in your body, in your mind, and creating that trusting relationship with yourself that you can begin to trust and feel safe in this person. So it's the same thing when we are starting to build that self-confidence and self-esteem, is that if we don't start from a basis of trust and honesty with ourselves, then really it's going to be really hard to build that relationship up. Mike and I have been through lots in our relationship. Close to the beginning of our relationship, we really struggled a little bit in the trust department in certain aspects of our relationship, I will say. And so we had to work on that. That was hard work. I mean, it almost broke us. But if it wasn't for that hard work that we went through to rebuild that trust, to learn that we could trust one another, and what that would look like, then we wouldn't be where we are today. So we built that foundation, and that foundation has been the best thing for our relationship, because we now can call each other on our shit, and it's okay, because I know where it's coming from. It's coming from a trusting, loving space that, hey, you didn't follow through on this, or hey, you said you were going to do this, or whatever. But it's allowed us to have that foundation for our relationship that we can build on and create a better, more open relationship with ourselves, with our communication. Any relationship is built around communication. So if you lack that communication, you lack that trust, then you have to start rebuilding that. Once you have that, then we can start practicing that gratitude. We can start practicing that forgiveness. We can start practicing that action. But you have to start with that foundation, the bottom of that pyramid or the bottom of the chakra, and work our way up. So I hope that gave you guys some ideas on getting started on your journey with self-love, and really self-acceptance, self-compassion. It's all linked in together, and not getting it muddled up with self-care and self-esteem, because those are very different. They are important, and we can dive into those on a whole nother episode. But for today, we're going to leave you with, we hope you begin to create a loving, trusting relationship with yourself, with who you are inside, and then that will begin to exude outside. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.